For this challenge, we're going to use parameters for the first time this year, which is quite exciting. So let's talk about the flow and at what point we need to think about those parameters. So we're starting from our customer's input. So we can see there that we've got information about how many flights that customer has taken, when their first flight was, when their last date that they flew was. And we're going to filter this last date flown first of all, so that we are only taking into consideration those customers who have flown in the last year. So we're saying that the last date flown has to be greater than or equal to the 23rd of February 2021. Sorry, I said that the wrong way around. The 21st of February 2023. There we go, that makes more sense. And so that filters our data set down from about 10,000 rows, I think, 9,999. It filters it down to 8,853. So then we want to categorize these customers that have flown in the last year to find out what bucket they will fall into. And this is where we bring in our parameter. So you can see that I've got one parameter used in this calculation. So we've got to create that first before we write our calculation. So I'm going to edit this parameter, but this is where the parameters sit up here at the top. I can just say create parameter and it brings up this menu. I've just called it my tier bin size. I really struggled to know what to call this to make it clear what was happening, but hopefully it was clear enough in the requirements. So we're having a whole number and we are using a list rather than all allowable values, and it's either a 5 or a 10 is what we're allowing here. And in our calculation, how we're then making that work is we're using the floor function and we're dividing the number of flights by that bin size. So for example, if we take a look at our top row of data, then this person has only flown once. Our parameter is currently set to 10, so 1 divided by 10 is going to then round down to tier 0. Something a bit more interesting there. If we do 27, divide that by 10, 2.7, but we only take into consideration the 2 as we're rounding down with that floor function, so they become tier 2. And we can see how that adapts even when we change our parameter. Now our 27 is being categorized as a 5 because 27 divided by 5 is 5 point something. It rounds down to 5. And then the customer is classified as tier 5. So hopefully that makes sense. And now we'll move on to the average flights per year. So in order to calculate that, we need to know how many years the customer has been a customer. So we are doing a date diff calculation here of year between the first flight and the last date flown. And then we're adding on 1 because we're taking it as, say for example, if they've flown only once, then that's their first year as a customer, because it's not the 0th year, if that makes sense. And also we're going to be dividing by this number, so we don't want any zeros in play because you can't divide by 0 mathematically. So as soon as a customer takes their second flight, which is a year from their first flight, for example, then that would be their second year. So that's why we're adding on that 1 there. And then we're just doing the average flights per year being the number of flights divided by that number of years as a customer, as an estimate as to how many flights a customer takes in a year. Of course, we don't have all the back data here, all the necessary rows to understand. Maybe a customer took 30 flights one year and then only 1 flight the next year. Yeah, we don't. That average will be very different to doing 31 divided by 2, but this is the data that we have to work with, so this is just an estimate for us. So we remove those fields that we used to help us work it out. And now we're ready to kind of think about joining it onto the Preppin loyalty dataset. So let's just take a look at that. So this is how it comes in to our prep workflow. We have a number of nulls. So if I scroll up here, click on the nulls, I see that I've got a couple of nulls here. Yeah, so a couple of null rows here that I want to filter out basically. So if I filter those nulls from the tier grouping, interesting, because I think when I initially built this workflow, it was reading in a number of null rows. Maybe that's no longer the case because we're filtering this field for the nulls, but you can see there are no nulls in this field. So clearly an issue that got resolved when saving it a second time. No worries, we'll ignore that filter nulls step for now. For our tiers, in order to join them to this calculated field that we did earlier of 0 to 6, then we need to make sure that our tier does not contain the word tier anymore. So we're going to go to our clean option there and remove the letters and also trim the spaces, so we just have the numeric values left over, which is what we've done here. And then we're going to filter to only leave behind either our 5 or our 10 here. So basically just whatever value we've selected in our parameter is what we want to carry through. So we just write a quick filter to say the tier grouping has to equal the tier bin size parameter. And then we're ready to make that join. So remember, we want each customer to have all the benefits included of the lower tiers as well as the tier that they are classed as. So a tier 2 customer would have all the benefits of tier 1 customers and tier 0 customers as well. So that involves using a non-equal join. So when we're matching our tier to our tier, we want a greater than or equal to sign to be in the middle. Now that will depend on which way round your data sets are. So if I had my customer data set over on the right, that would need to switch to a less than or equal to join clause. But the way that I always go back to thinking about it is what's the upper bound, and I want to make sure that my my sign there is kind of the bigger open mouth is eating the upper bound, basically. I always go back to primary school thinking about that. So our upper bound is our customer classification, and then we want all the tiers below that to come through as well. So you can see that is going to explode our data a little bit, but that's okay because it's bringing through all the data that we want it to, so we're happy with that. And now we are getting rid of a few nulls here, so if the benefits field is null, then that gets filtered out. And we're just removing an extra field there as well. And now it's time to think about this benefits field and split it out. So go to the split values option up here. I chose to do a custom split, and I split it on a comma and split off all of those fields so that you then only have one benefit for each field. So for example, it's not very clear in this field, but if I click down here, for example, then you can see how I've got some commas and a second benefit listed. It's just this field here isn't quite long enough to display those commas. And it's actually more prevalent when I'm on my 10 parameter. There we go. I was wondering why that field was looking a bit strange, but here we can see that we have a lot more commas between benefits when we are thinking about using a 10 grouping. Okay, so I split those out into those 3 fields, and then I pivot those split fields so that I have a row per individual benefit, filter out those empty or null rows that we have left over there, and then we're ready to join on the cost information. So let's just take a look at that cost input. We can see that we've got our benefits listed there. We've got our costings as well. I thought it'd be interesting or useful to have kind of the numeric value split out from that frequency value. So I chose to duplicate this field, so right click and duplicate the field, and then for one remove the numbers, for the other remove the letters. Unfortunately, the pound sign is neither a number nor a letter, so we do need to write a quick calculation to replace that pound sign with nothing. So here is what I'm doing there. With the cost field, I'm just replacing the cost and replacing the pound sign with nothing. And then doing that duplication. In one, I remove the letters and spaces. In the other, I remove the numbers and the spaces and just rename it to be frequency. And then we're ready to join those two together on that benefit field. Remove the fields that we don't need. and then calculate that yearly cost to say that if that frequency is per flight, then multiply the cost by the average number of flights per year of that customer. Otherwise, leave the cost alone, that's all fine. And then the final step is just to group by our tier, sum up the yearly cost, count the distinct customer IDs, and just do a little bit of renaming of that so that we have our finished data set. So hopefully you enjoyed that challenge. A little bit of a long one for you for that intermediate. Hopefully it didn't stray too far into difficulty, but thank you very much for watching.